Hi, my name is James Andrella, and you are listening to the Back to Human podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be diving into pregnancy, labor, and birth. If you've been following Jade and I, you'd know that we just celebrated Jack's, our baby boy's first birthday last week. And during Jade's pregnancy, we had planned for an at-home birth. We found a midwife that we liked, and we were referred to by some friends, not really knowing what we were getting ourselves into because this was our first child. So everything was new, everything was fresh, and we bought a ton of different books, courses. We watched plenty of different documentaries, and we were pretty confident with our decision to have the at-home birth. Throughout her pregnancy, there was some things that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to us, and we were able to deny or work around many of the things that just seemed kind of unnecessary, like having multiple scans or Jade having to drink the glucola drink for gestational diabetes. We had also made up our minds that we would forgo any vaccines based off the research that I had done. Things didn't really go as planned, though. Our midwife made the decision to transfer us to a hospital where Jade was still thankfully able to give birth to our beautiful baby boy, vaginally and unmedicated. And it definitely wasn't our ideal environment. However, the experience did teach us quite a bit. From an outside perspective, and in my personal opinion, it seems that women have been almost robbed of what should or could be rather one of the best experiences of their lives, which would be giving birth, bringing a baby into this world. On the show with me today, I have Whapio Diane Bartlett. Whapio has been an independent midwife for 42 years, practicing and teaching about the consciousness of birth. Whapio believes that the way that we give birth is a mirror of our maturity on this planet. If we understood the magnitude of birth and our potential for transformation through birth, we would organically raise our level of consciousness and all of the inappropriate things we do would just disappear. Without further ado, Whapio, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So, Whapio, would you mind giving me a brief background of how you got involved with midwifery?
Well, sure.
It doesn't have to be brief, by the way.
Well, okay. So I never envisioned myself as a midwife. I didn't even know there were midwives. When I was younger, I had done a lot of things looking for my purpose in life. And one of them was I worked for a newspaper and I was a book reviewer. And they gave me, in my angsty 20s, early 20s, they gave me a book on birth. And I wasn't really in that lane at all. But I read the book because it was my duty and to review it. And then at first I thought it was a joke, or I thought it was a satire, because I couldn't imagine a woman getting pregnant and carrying this baby for 9 months and getting as close as you can be to another human being. And then when it's time to go to have the birth, you just kind of go to a hospital and you lie there. Somebody cuts the cord and takes your baby away. And that was the part I couldn't get into. Why would anyone ever let them take your baby away? It isn't even mammalian. And even though I was 20 and not looking to get pregnant, I was like, wow, when I do have a baby, I'm never going to a hospital. Mm-hmm. All right. So then now I'm 35 and living in Georgia, where the midwifery renaissance had not occurred in 1982. All right. It was just a hospital. That's basically your choice. Okay. And somehow I felt like, well, what's my strategy here? Okay. I mean, I didn't know what to do because I thought about having a home birth, all right, not going to the hospital, like I said I would never do. But then I wasn't really sure and confident enough for myself to say, well, I'm going to do this by myself. My husband and I will do this by ourselves. I wasn't quite there yet. This was 1982. And so now I was working in a camera store and in the mall. And I was about 6 months pregnant and I was showing. I hadn't figured out my strategy yet. This guy comes in to pick up some baby pictures and he wants to show me his baby pictures. And I realized, oh, it's because I'm pregnant. And when you're pregnant, you are the goddess, even if a person has absolutely no understanding of what that would mean or any spirituality at all. Somehow pregnant women are considered godly. Okay. And people hold the door for you and they carry your groceries because you're pregnant. All right. So this gentleman wanted me to look at his pictures, and I was, of course, ready to give him, the pregnancy blessing. And he said, our baby's, special. And I said, well, okay, I'm thinking all babies are special.
Mhm.
He said, our baby was born at home. Now, here I am in Augusta, Georgia, all right, in 1982. And this gentleman is telling me that their baby was born at home. Well, the angels are now singing in the mall, okay? It's like, it's going to happen. So I went home and he gave me the midwife's number. I went home. I talked to my husband about it. We were both on the same page. I called the midwife. I'm so excited. I'm 35 at this time, 35 years old, first baby. And the midwife is sort of aloof. She's kind of like, and then she says the unconscionable. Well, write me a letter and tell me why you want to have your baby at home. And I was really, this is not going the way I'm thinking it's going to go. All right. So I wrote her a letter and I told her why I wanted to have a home birth. I just, because, you know why? Because I did. I wanted to have a home birth because that's what I wanted. And I said to her, if you want to be engaged in this with me, I would just love that, and then I sent a letter. So I got a letter. No, she called me back as soon as she got the letter. And she said, well, I'm sorry if I was a bit aloof with you, because I think my letter was a little choppy, And she said, I'm sorry, but I have to vet people out because I am not a legal practitioner. And it never crossed my mind that there were politics to medicine or midwifery. I just thought, you're a midwife. You sit at birth with women. And she said, was like, no, I know. And I have to tell you that, I'm not licensed. And, but, I liked you and let's meet. So she opened this whole doorway to me. I mean, I didn't even know that there was really midwifery. And then I didn't know that I could be a midwife. I never wanted to be a doctor or a clinical practitioner, but from my midwife, I learned that you're not. Birth is really not a clinical experience. No matter what, you can have clinical care if that's what you wish, but inherently birth is not a clinical experience. And I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. I don't want to be a clinical practitioner, but I would love, I loved being pregnant. I loved the whole mystery and physiology and everything about being pregnant. I could spend my life involved in this. So by that phone call and the time she came to visit me, which was probably about a week, I knew I was going to be a midwife. I just knew. I was like this. Okay, I'm 35. I'm in the prime of my life. I'm going to be a mother and a midwife at the same time. Bring it. Okay, I'm ready. Bring it. Of course, I didn't tell my midwife that because I knew she would have said, oh, everybody gets infatuated with midwifery and birth, and you need to be a mother now, and you need to, call me in 3 years. And I said to myself, but I'm going to wait for my sign. I'm not going to tell her now. I'm not going to, not tell her, but ask her if I could apprentice with her. All right. Because I loved that she did the time-honored apprenticeship with another midwife for a while. All right. So that's what I wanted to do. So anyway, one day I told her she was really cool. She didn't give anybody a grief. Back in those days, it was this idea of you'd have to be giving birth within a certain time of your due date. Otherwise, everything got sideways. She was like, I was due July 18th. I didn't, June 24th. I had my baby July 18th. She didn't say a word. She didn't give me any grief, any attitude. She gave me flowers. I said, that's how I'm going to be. That's what I want. Okay. And but I didn't tell her. I had to wait for my sign. And this was my sign. So one day, I was past my due date for a bit here, 24th, I don't know. And I just said to her, well, I want to talk to you about something. And she said, okay, when she came to visit me. All right. And she would come to visit me all the time. She was an hour and a half away. And I thought, again, that's how I'm going to be. I'm going to go visit the moms I work with, instead of having them come to my office. So anyway, I said, I've got to tell you something. So we went in my bedroom and we sat down. And I still remember how the light came in through the window that day. And I said to her, I'm 35. I don't like pain. I don't know how this is going to go. I hear rumors that the older you are, the harder it is. But, I really love you. You're my midwife and I love my husband. And so I want to apologize now if I do anything that's untoward or rude, because I don't mean it. But pain sometimes makes people do that. So I want to apologize now. And she looked at me and she said, you'll be fine. But I hear what you're saying and I accept your apology. Well, you know what? I was totally liberated by that. Totally. She could hear me. She just didn't say, oh, you'll be fine, because I would have said, you don't understand. Maybe not. She said, you'll be fine. But then she said, but I hear you and I accept your apology. Do you know what that meant to me? That meant I could do whatever I needed to do to birth my baby in my way, even if it was offending her. Okay. Because she had liberated me because she could hear me. And then I thought to myself, if I tell her that I'd like to be a midwife and that I want to apprentice with her, she can hear me. She can hear me. And so I did. And, I told her I wanted to be a midwife and apprentice and whatnot. And she said, well, you'll be a good midwife. So I received my initiation and I apprenticed with her for 3 years and then went out on my own. All right. And there's lots going on in there. And I practiced for 20 years after that. And then I taught for 20. And then, you see, women in rural Georgia, which is usually where I would give my clientele came from. Oftentimes I have a birth with a preacher's wife. And then if everything went well, I get a lot of business from that church. All right. And all this was, I'm living in Georgia now. Okay. Actually, I'm a New York City girl, but I enjoyed my time in Georgia. All right. And my children there. So that's how I got into midwifery. And that was my calling. And it was very, fortuitous for me, because, you can spend a long time trying to figure out what you want to do in life, but then when you really get it and you got it, well, it just flows.
Yeah. You just knew, and then you answered the call.
Yes. And there wasn't the angels were singing before, but they, nah. So.
That's a awesome story. And now you're teaching others. You'll be teaching Jade. So you mentioned a few things there. And even at the time, I believe it was 1982, if I have that correct, that you had never even heard of a midwife. And this was true for myself when Jade got pregnant. I didn't know what a midwife was. So it doesn't seem like people even know that this is an option. And now birth has become this clinical event when it doesn't need to, but I don't feel like a lot of people know that this type of stuff is out there at all. So what exactly is a midwife, if you could describe it simply for those that have not heard, or if people do not know what a midwife is?
Well, okay. And well, first of all, the word midwife comes from the German with wife, midwife. Okay. So that you are the person who is with woman traditionally during her birth. But what you also realize too, and we've lost this, but I'm praying for the return of it. Oftentimes your village midwife was your village wise woman. She was your herbalist, your homeopath, your counselor, your social worker, your librarian, your cook, your everything under the sun came under the province of the woman who was with women, the midwife. All right. And then, I had never heard of a midwife except maybe in some historical fiction or something like that, knowing that, oh, yes, there used to be people before doctors and whatnot. And but that's all gone now. All right. That's once again history. And when I realized that there were midwives, I just thought in my naivety as well that a midwife is a midwife is a midwife. And then I learned that there's nurse midwives and there's independent midwives and there's just other people who are not in the system who are midwives. And this was my midwife. She was not in the system. She had no licensing. She just went to births. All right. And that's what I did. I didn't want to be a nurse midwife. I never wanted to be anything clinical. I never thought birth was really clinical anyway. All right. Unless you were high risk or something. So today, though, however, sadly, I guess, the word midwife has been co-opted. And the word midwife now usually refers to a clinically trained practitioner who manages the care of a pregnant woman and through her birth and postpartum. And, that's not what I would call myself as a midwife. I guess I term myself an independent midwife. For many years, I just worked independently. People got word of me, like with the church. I would have a lot of business in that church. I worked in rural Georgia. I worked with many religious groups. I worked with groups, the Mennonite folk and people like that who also wanted to keep birth out of the system and not so clinical. All right. So, and then what happened was that, well, all of a sudden, midwives are like here to stay or something. Doctors were like, oh, it's a hippie phase. It'll pass, the midwives, as if. Well, the season was right. Women wanted a midwife. There were many women who didn't want the clinical paradigm, okay? Didn't want all the testing. Honestly, didn't want a managed experience. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we're evolving. Now, back in 1965, we all wanted to be managed. We were coming out of the world wars. We were afraid. We needed leadership. Science took over, all right, as leadership. But now, after Woodstock and the revolution, all right, and the 60s, the late 60s, what was on the table there was autonomy. All right. That whole movement was all about taking more autonomy for ourselves. So you get home birth, you got home schooling, you got home church, you got the family. And this is one of my taglines, is returning birth to the family. That's what I'm doing. All right. Mm-hmm. And I never had the intention of managing care. I took care of you. I took good care of you. I nurtured you and built your confidence about birth and educated you about, this is the wonderful things about birth. I've had many women say, before meeting you and having, these understandings, these concepts come that you could love your birth or you could be totally transformed by your birth. I used to be so afraid. Now I'm kind of looking forward to having a baby, mm-hmm. So what we have right now, all right, over the years, just a little bit of history, midwives were here to stay. Okay, it was the time for that. It was a season for something like that. The 60s propelled it. Women were excited to have a caregiver that was just for them. Because, midwife is just this woman-to-woman care. And that is precious. All right. That is a very precious thing. Many women, when they get pregnant, want another woman to be involved. All right. Hopefully the village wise woman, mm-hmm. someone that you respect and that, is used to sitting with women in pregnancy and knows a lot about birth. But anyway, so then after there was this midwifery renaissance kind of in the 80s now, from the late 60s, the 90s, the 70s, the 80s, midwives were here to stay. And many people thought, well, we need to ride herd on these women. They're not licensed. They're not legal. They're practicing. So, and many midwives also got on that train because they wanted to be validated. All right. They wanted to have a place on the spectrum of birth. They wanted to be able to practice in ways where they could collect insurance and different things like that. All right. So you see that midwifery is becoming more socialized, as it were. It wasn't just ladies sitting at birth with you and taking good care of you. It was now, how do you get trained to be a midwife? And what kind of accountability would you have to the public? And do you need certifications? And do you need licensing? And some states license now, and some don't. And in some states, midwifery is the whole legal issue of midwifery is a very interesting one, and has, as it say, I'm kind of fast tracking of the story. But today, what we find ourselves in is doctors and the medical model saying to midwives, we appreciate you. We want you to stand with us. We need you. We want you. Now let us train you. That's the fine print. So what you have now, oftentimes the idea of a midwife is someone who has been clinically trained and has a practice like a doctor, and sees you and has an office and manages your care. And part of managing your care has become the adapting some of the clinical experiences, such as having ultrasounds and taking glucose tolerance tests and having a strep test and fitting in certain parameters and so on like that, okay, and being risked out and whatnot. So that's the state of midwifery right now, except, well, women are not satisfied with that. Women were not satisfied with another clinical practitioner who was a woman who was much more loving. All right. And the experience of the midwife is beautiful in the sense that midwives do bring what I call TEA, time, energy, and attention. You get that. All right. Oh, dear. I'm sorry. You have an editor, right?
Yes, we're okay.
All right.
Baby
So,
call.
so what you're seeing now is that midwifery has landed and taken its place on the spectrum of clinical practitioners, unless you feel that you want to be an independent midwife. I was always an independent midwife. I've never had any certifications or licensing or anything like that, but I was practicing in the day 20 years ago, in the days when midwifery was sort of in that nebulous place of, oh, it'll pass, it's a hippie phase. Okay. So okay, so that's kind of what a midwife is and what a midwife is today. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you the difference between the independent midwife and the clinical midwife, and that is that the clinical midwife is trained to manage your care, whereas the independent midwife doesn't do that. She doesn't manage your care. She facilitates your choices. You get to make any and all choices that you want. And the midwife of today, also called the birth keeper, all right, is a woman who is a fountain of information, can give you the truth about birth and with a transparency to it. And you make your choices, and your independent midwife facilitates your choices. I think it's very forward thinking, because I think when you're managed, well, let me put it this way. Being in birth for 40 some years, people often ask me, well, what's different? And a lot of things are different. When I was a young midwife, your choice was a hospital, and then birthing centers came along, and then home birth, sort of, and now free birth. Look at that. Okay. So the gamut, the bandwidth has widened completely from when I started being a midwife 40 years ago. All right. But so what are women saying to me? Women are, over the years, I have followed women. I haven't really followed midwives too much. I practice kind of alone, all right, myself. And I always had my finger on what women wanted. What do women want? Not what do midwives want, not what does the state want. What do women want? And they tell me this. I want my own birth. I want my own birth. I don't want my mother's birth. I don't want the government's idea of birth. I don't want the midwife's birth or your
Mhm.
birth either, Whapio. I want my own birth. Wow. That's what women want. Now, not everyone. I'm talking about the vanguard of women. All right.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about women who are on that edge of evolution. All right.
Mhm.
So I want my own birth. Now, who will stand with us? Because not all of us want to have our own birth alone in the bathroom. All right. A lot of us would like to have the presence of a wise woman in the room to witness. That's what women tell me. I loved my free birth women, especially. They tell me, "Oh, I loved my birth, Whapio. It was the most powerful thing I ever did to give birth on my own terms." Okay, but I wish I had had the presence of a wise woman in the room, not somebody to guide me or talk to me or manage me or make suggestions or anything, just to witness me, just to knit in the corner. All right. And I get that. That's what I want. That's what I would have wanted. Okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that birth. My midwife managed me in my
Mhm.
2 home births. Okay, but I can't complain because the alternative was unsatisfactory. All right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
okay, so what do women want? They want their own birth, and they want someone who will witness it with them. All right,
Mhm.
someone they respect and love. Their wise woman. All right. So that's how I think midwifery itself has evolved.
Mhm.
And sadly, the word midwife, as I had said before, is co opted. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I call myself a midwife because I have 40 years in birth. But young women coming up today, you know, they are faced with the reality that you're not a nurse, you're not a nurse midwife, you're not licensed, so you're not a real midwife.
Yeah. So there's not as much trust, even though maybe it's not really as warranted. It's like if someone knows how to do their job, like do the job, do they need all the letters and the fancy titles that come with it? And what you described was pretty much our experience, how even though we went with a midwife and we were planning the at-home birth, it still seemed kind of like a managed experience. Like we had to show up for these certain appointments. We had to deny this, we had to deny that. It seemed like there was a whole lot of fluff. It wasn't really, at least from my perspective, because you did mention that it's in a family experience as well. It didn't seem very fun. It seemed very like scheduled. I know in the beginning you mentioned that your birth actually was not late. It's always on time, but you were due in June, and then baby came July 18th. With Jade's pregnancy, the midwife had told us if she's over 41 weeks that she can no longer provide her care, which is kind of like, well, we just invested all this money into this, and now what do you mean? So now if it's one day over, we have to go through the traditional route, which is kind of what we're dreading, what we're trying to run away from right now, because we tried to run over in this direction. So it definitely still seems like a very managed experience. And you mentioned confidence too. You've also mentioned that women can give birth on their own. You can. This is within you. It's like it's what God, the creator, or whatever you want to call it, gifted you with. Like this is your rite of passage. Men can't do this.
No, no.
And with this managed experience, it to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like this kind of takes away women's confidence within themselves.
Yes, it does. And actually, it's downright infantilizing. The way women are invited to have birth today, especially in the clinical model or with a clinical practitioner, is really to give up your power to us. Let us manage you, and you'll have the best possible outcome. We don't want that anymore. Okay. It's clinical, it's flat. Um, People ask me if you had to tell anybody anything, about birth, what would it be? And today, this is what I would say. Don't give birth with anyone who doesn't have your best interests at heart. look for someone who's completely invested in you first, not invested in their license or how their colleagues practice or what people will think of them or all of that. Have your investment be that person be invested in you 100%. Have that, because otherwise you lose. If you lose that investment, you lose the intimacy.
Mhm.
All right. It becomes just a professional experience.
Mhm.
These are the tests. This is what we do. This is what we do at these many weeks. And, we give you a big smile and we take time with you and answer all of your questions. But you never feel like, if you still, I'm saying in what's out there and oftentimes managed midwifery, you still feel like a client, you know?
Yeah.
You still feel like a patient or a client rather than a mom, all right? A pregnant mom, a birthing, someone in the birthing continuum. And I feel like women want more than that. They don't want to just be someone's client. They want someone who really is invested in them as a priority. And if you hold a license, unfortunately, that's not possible.
Mhm.
All right. Now, I know that there are many wonderful midwives out there, and some of them are licensed and they do good by stealth. I know they do. All right. Yeah, we'll push it a little, or we'll give you we'll fix your due date a little more, or something like that. But what's happened is that midwives have now have to experience many of the same protocols that doctors have.
Yeah.
All
As you
right.
said, it's been co-opted. So the word. So as
Mhm.
much as they want to invest and make the goddess, it takes the goddess out of the situation. They can't even do that because they're restricted.
Well, here's what happened when you talked about your story. It didn't sound like there was an emergent situation for transferring. Okay. And what's happening today is many midwives live in fear.
Mhm.
The licensed midwives they're always being looked at. The doctors have not really accepted midwives. Okay. And so anytime a midwife messes up, well, she messes it up for all the midwives. So your colleagues are even pressing you to be sorry, not be sorry, be safe, not sorry. So transport. If in doubt, transport. And, my thoughts are, if in doubt, let's find out what's going on. Let's fix it. Let's take care of it. Let it come. And a lot of times things come, they just take care of themselves. All right.
Mhm.
And I feel like when you as a caregiver have reassurance in that mother, rather than looking at birth as, dangerous or fraught with whatever, it just erodes a woman's confidence. It's infantilizing. It really does not. It's not really a rite of passage.
Mhm.
All right. A rite of passage is something that you do basically alone. No one can do a rite of passage for you or with you. The idea is that you had this baby and now you know that your power resides within, not with the media or money or a midwife or medicine or any of those M's. All right. Your power comes from within you. That's the rite of passage. Well, midwives don't give women a chance to do that. All right, midwives manage women, and they do that because they're afraid that if something happens, they will be punished. So I don't think that's right. I understand why midwives transfer. I
Yeah.
don't think it's right, but I understand why they do. And where does that come from? The midwives themselves? No, it comes from their need to please the system. Okay, so they're handcuffed as well in many ways. All
Yeah.
right.
I understood in hindsight. During the moment, I definitely felt like the transfer was premature, and I can't speak for Jade, but I think we did discuss this, and there was a little bit of resentment within myself because I had full faith in Jade to give
Yeah.
birth. I knew that she could do this. I knew that she was strong enough. And guess what? Even in not the ideal environment and not in the ideal position either, because she was on her back, she was still able to bring Jax into this world vaginally and unmedicated. Meanwhile, the OBGYN, I wanted to fight. We'll get into this later. She kept mentioning C-section, C-section, C-section. Like, no, that's not happening. And during our transfer to the hospital, you have all these beep boops, you have all the noises, you have this person trying to stick an IV in her. I can't recall what book it was that I read this, but it was regarding like a pregnant cat where this girl had this cat that came to their house and it would always stay outside. One day the girl noticed that the cat was pregnant and was going to labor. So the cat was in like a chicken coop. It was giving birth. I think it gave birth to one of its kittens. And then all of a sudden it heard this bang and it ran off. It grabbed its kitten and then it ran off. The girl never found it, or she did find it later, but the cat ran off to the woods to give birth to the rest of the litter uninterrupted. Mm-hmm. So during our stay in the hospital or during the labor, you have all of these interruptions that's going on. It's like, it's not a safe place for anyone to give birth. Like, how can you possibly feel relaxed when it's pretty much just anxiety, like amplified? And I looked in Jade's eyes and I could see that, I don't want to say that she was wavering, but she was looking for some anchor. She was looking for some place to hold on to, because I know that she still had the strength within her to do this, but it was deteriorating with everything that was going on around her, including, I would say, the midwife, because the midwife was the reason for the transfer. So it's almost like you lose a little bit of trust there. It's like, I was trusting you, and now this didn't happen. So I remember looking in her eyes, and I didn't say a word, but I said it with my eyes. I was like, you have this, you can do this. I believe that you're strong enough to do so. And it did work out, thankfully, in our favor. But with all of these interruptions, how is it possible for a woman to have a successful birth when, according to what I've learned throughout your courses, just kind of looking over Jade's shoulders, women are supposed to have an undisturbed birth. Like, this is their own thing. They have to go within, not without, in order to bring this miracle into this world. Mm-hmm. So what is an undisturbed birth, and how is it different from what women are currently receiving through conventional medicine?
Well, all right.
There's a lot.
Here's what I said. Here's in my years of watching women, this is what I have crystallized it down to. When a woman is pregnant, she really does like to have a companion, somebody that she can ask questions and knows that she'll get an honest answer, someone who is elevating her and exalting her in her pregnancy, someone who doesn't give her any anxiety or risk screening or pressure to do this or that. All right. That's what a woman wants in pregnancy, a companion. And that midwife, well, the midwife used to be that companion for you, okay? And then in the postpartum, women really do love to have that same person, that anchor for their pregnancy in the postpartum with them, because the postpartum is a lot about integrating all of the stuff that's happened, okay? And you were there, all right? You, James, were there, all right? And the midwife was there. And just weaving that story together. So a woman really appreciates a midwife in the pregnancy and in the postpartum. But in the birth, no, you don't need to even be there. My idea is that you're in another room if she wants you to be in the house. All right. Maybe you're singing out on the porch. Many births I have just sat on the porch and sang. All right. I don't get it. An undisturbed birth really means that you don't disturb the women in any way. And to me, anything that is, no matter how well-meaning it is, anything that someone else initiates, anything that's not initiated by the mother is a distraction. All right. It's a distraction, and it keeps her away from what she's doing. So people don't want to hear that, because we have a lot of people who make their living
doing things.
doing this. Okay, I want to say distracting women.
Yeah.
And you can still have a doula, you can still have a midwife. It's just that how involved are they going to get in your birth when, and a lot of times you just can't trust someone to not get involved, because if they see you in pain, they want to come in and help you. And that's the normal conscientious thing to do. But that's not what a rite of passage is. So you can't call it that anymore. And women know that. And that's why somehow I think women say, I have to do it again because I didn't get what I'm missing. And there's more to it. There's more than, getting a rite of passage is a sacred ceremony. All right. It really is. And if you're going to use those words, use them correctly. A rite of passage does not mean you comfort the woman and carry her up the hill and hold her bag for her. And it means that you're standing by, all right, as she goes through this, and you'll be there on the other side, all right, to receive and witness her. Okay. And the other thing that I think is really devastating is, if you want to talk about this now, I want to, it's the role of the father. I think what we have done with fathers is disgraceful. In hospitals, we turn them into wallpaper, as if they were the least important person in the room, and sometimes just getting in the way. Birth is the creation of family. And no doctor or midwife brought that light to that mother and said, will you gestate our baby? I think totally the wrong person is catching a woman's baby. I hardly ever have caught another person's baby. Why? Because it's not my baby. It's not my privilege. All right. And if you ask me to, and the husband is like, please, or I don't feel good, or I'll catch a baby. But generally speaking, in our culture right now, the wrong person is catching the baby. All right. We take men's role away from them. And then we hire legions of social workers to fix it, to fix the family that we have inadvertently broken by taking away the father's God-given right to receive the light of their conception. I can't tell you how sad it is for me to see this, when I know full well that women and men, women and their partners, are totally capable of bringing this baby. All right. One time I worked with this couple, and in Georgia, and they were an older couple in the sense that this was going to be one of those late babies, okay, late in your life babies. I think both of their kids were in their 20s, and they were really surprised at first, and then they were like into it, they were like, yeah, we're gonna have a baby. All right. So the mom wanted to have her baby at home, and she was very down to earth, sensible, and the dad was he was there for every minute of every prenatal. All right. Sometimes he'd just stand in the corner. His name was Buddy. And he would just stand there and listen and like a pillar of strength and whatnot. And so she called me one day, and I lived about an hour and 15 minutes away from her. And she said, I think I'm in labor. So I came to her house, and she told me she had been having contractions. I came to her house, and she was like, I'm so sorry. This is the days before cell phones. Okay. She said, I would have called you back, and I did, but your husband said you were already gone. And you know what? She said, I don't think I'm really in labor now. So I hung around for a while, then she wasn't. So I went back home. And then a couple of days later, she called me again, and she said, I'm pretty sure that this is it. Well, the same thing happened. I get there, and she said, I'm not in labor. The contractions have stopped. And I said, well, all right, now don't not call me. She said, I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't be embarrassed, and don't not call me. So the next time she called me, she said, I know I'm in labor, and I don't know if you're going to make it. Okay. So I blew out of the house and down the road and got to her house, and there she was with her baby. All right. Buddy and the baby, all three of them kind of nestled into the bed. They didn't call anyone. They didn't call their children. They didn't call an ambulance. They just had their baby. And so at one point I was apologizing. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't make it." And you know what she said? She said, "I don't ever want you to say that again." She said, "If you were here, everything would have been different." And she said, it's not like I'm blaming you or anything. I'm not saying that. She said, "But because you weren't here, Buddy and we became one person. We worked seamlessly. He knew what I wanted. He knew what I needed. We didn't need to speak. He just caught his son. If you were here, that wouldn't have happened. And no fault of yours, but he would have given his power to you. But because you didn't come here, something happened to Buddy and our whole life is going to be different now." She said, it was amazing. And I was like, I get you. I get that. Absolutely. I get that. And so I realized what she was saying, and another story, one of the students in a prior cohort, she got pregnant and she said, "I just want my husband to catch this baby." And at first he had his doubts about having a baby at all at home, and I finally came around to that, and he was like, but then just to us, no. And he said, "Yes." She said, "Yes. And I want you to catch the baby and it's going to be great." And finally they talked about this a lot and a lot and a lot. All right. And he was all right. He was like, "Okay, I'll catch the baby." And she asked me to come to her birth. And I said, "I would come to your birth, but if you want your husband to catch the baby, I can't be there." You know what I mean? Because he will give his power to me. He will look at me as the most experienced person. I said, "So if you want your husband to catch the baby, just call me, let me know you're in labor, but I'm not going to be there." She said, "I get it." So they had their baby. He caught the baby. Everything was beautiful. She said, "Whapio, he carries this baby around." She told me this 2 weeks after the birth. She said, "He's still doing it. He carries this baby around, looking in this baby's eyes, saying, 'He's so beautiful. He's so beautiful. He's so beautiful.'" And I'm saying, well, see, that's what happens when the man catches his baby, And in terms of domestic violence, I think a man who kneels there with his woman and receives their baby is much less likely to ever hurt those two people. I really do. And I think that right there, when we remove fathers and place someone else, sometimes a stranger, in the realm of what is the creation of family, I think we're making a mistake way beyond what we could ever imagine right now. Right now, I don't feel like we understand that. I don't understand the immensity and the magnitude of birth. All right. We think of it as a clinical practice. We've been imprinted to think that it is a dangerous practice and that it needs clinical attention, and it doesn't.
So with the domestic violence there, what I take from that is, say for instance, like, this is just my comparisons. Like, if a child has some trauma when they're growing up, or they're not having a need met, there's something that a puzzle piece has been taken out of the equation for them, which in this case would be the husband, the father catching the baby. It's like, you don't know what it is that's missing. You don't know what it is that's wrong. So in order for you to express that, you act out in these certain ways. So it could be, I could definitely see that. And then birth definitely is this magical just transformation, both of not just the mother, but yeah, the family. Mm-hmm. What I experienced when Jade even went into labor, it was like this time dilation, like time just sped up. It's almost like we went through this wormhole. So maybe you could elaborate on what this is, because the way that I see it is like the vagina is this portal.
Yes.
It's like a portal to bring this baby from one dimension into another. Hasn't known the outside world at all. It's been in this internal environment, and this is its portal. It's it may offend some people, but the correct way. I may want to reword that or even edit that. You can fill that in for me. But the real rite of passage for baby to come into this world is through the vagina. So you have all these interventions, you have the cascade of events, you have the nurses, the doctors, everyone offering these distractions which don't put mom at a state of ease where she's able to just go inside herself and make this happen. So you have the cascade of interventions, the Pitocin, which if anyone that's listening to this, please watch The Business of Being Born. That will tell you about the cascade of interventions. Like once Pitocin starts, generally the outcome of that is going to be a C-section. It's almost like a little trap. But overall, this, what should be incredible, magical experience for the entire family, starts off completely counter to what it should be, because a stranger, as you mentioned, probably with some vinyl gloves or rubber gloves, is catching your baby. It's not your bacteria that's touching it, hasn't felt this person's warmth, hasn't heard them ever before. They're probably masked up too. It's like, this is a very strange environment. So the whole birthing process has kind of just been tainted.
Yes, I totally agree. It looks nothing like birth. Okay. There's a really great guy out there. His name is Michel Audin, and he writes books. And he is the person who actually coined the phrase undisturbed birth and brought the concept of undisturbed birth out to the public. All right. Because before that, people wouldn't have known what you meant by an undisturbed birth, and they would have said, well, birth has to be managed, has to be monitored, and if people get disturbed in the doing of that, well, it's for the baby's sake. You see what I mean? We pull the baby card a lot, saying, oh, but if we don't do that, your baby could be at risk. And so women instead of getting exaltation, and support, women get risk screening and anxiety. And so what often happens is that the milieu of birth becomes adrenaline drenched instead of oxytocin drenched. Okay. Your body's hormones will shift in regard to the bright lights, the interruptions, the fear that someone's just going to walk in on you, men feeling like their wives are exposed unnecessarily. It's like a minefield in a way. And I think a lot of women, even if a woman had a fairly good birth, I'll tell you this. Sometimes women come to me and they say, Whapio, I loved my midwife. Everything was pretty straightforward. I had a really good birth. Okay. But I still feel like something's missing. I still feel like I didn't get it. Why do I feel that way? And I can't get my mind around it. I can't stop thinking about it. I should be thinking about my baby, and I'm thinking about, why didn't I get what I was supposed to get from my birth that I can't even put into words? And I'm like, I do know exactly what you mean. All right. I do. Giving birth is one of the most powerful and memorable things you will do as a couple. All right, as a woman and as a couple. And you talked about the portal, and women in their birth get to open that portal when they're ready. We don't see any idea in our world today that birth is an altered state of experience. Okay, what's so good about being an altered state? Because an altered state of consciousness will widen your perspective. All right. It will give you information that's not available in ordinary reality. All right. Ordinary reality is adrenaline. Okay. When it comes to birth. Whereas the hormones of birth, like oxytocin and relaxin, they are designed to relax you. All right. They are designed to soften your vision. They are designed to help you pull away from the world. Why? So that you can actually, open that portal. And when you are portaling through there with your baby, all right, the veils are really thin between you and your baby. You can hear your baby. All right, the veils are thin in different places like that. That's what the altered state of consciousness can do. It can widen your gaze, okay? It can expand your perspective. It can tell you things that your baby needs, that no one else could ever tell you. No one else could tell you how to move your body in pregnancy or in birth, right? So this is where women lose confidence in themselves, when they're not allowed to fully engage the altered state, when they are not allowed to open the portal, and they just keep it there. All right. They keep it manageable. Whereas when you are in an altered state and going through a rite of passage, transformation does not happen within your comfort zone. Transformation happens outside of your comfort zone. So therefore, women should be allowed to go anywhere they want. And yes, the women that say to me, I want my own birth, they are also saying, I know I'm going to the edges of my reality. I know it's going to hurt. I know I might cry. I don't care. I want my birth. I want my transformation. And I'm showing up for it. And what happened to you was somehow it got railroaded. All right. But I wasn't there. I don't know why the midwife transported you. And I also know that what happens to us is usually what is ordained. Okay. And nobody kills anybody else. It was already done. All right. If you ask Einstein. All right. So okay. So what happens in that milieu of opening a portal is that it matters who's in the room. There are some people who do not understand about what a portal is and opening a portal and all that BS or whatever. And therefore, they're not the right people to be in the room with you. Your midwife used to be your spiritual confessor, even, if you will, okay? Someone that you admired, someone that you respected, someone who could easily bridge the gaps into the altered state and knew how to get into the altered state, all right? And knew how to take you for a walk up the mountain, and you would go into an altered state. You have 9 months to practice going into an altered state, even though being in that altered state of brainwaves, okay, this is a scientific experience. All right, if you want to, we can put little electroencephalograms on people's heads and see that how their brainwaves change as they go deeper into altered states. Their brainwaves slow down. So that's what's happening in labor. A woman is removing herself from ordinary reality where everything is fast, 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 and adrenaline soaked, and moving into that place where time changes and things occur to you and the veils are thin and you can have an altered state experience. Even if we talk about the pineal gland and DMT and things like that, okay, we know that DMT is produced around that pineal gland, and it's given to your body at birth, when you're being born and when you're giving birth, just like when you die or when you have a spontaneous healing. I mean, there are so many things that we don't really apply to birth because the clinical model has just made the intuitive model seem frivolous. Or you see what I'm saying there? Yeah. It's very unbalanced. And the clinical model is real. Anatomy and physiology is real, and knowing anatomy and physiology will set you free. Why? Because if you know what the body's capable of doing, you won't disturb it. So here with undisturbed birth, what we're talking about is allowing a woman to find her own way through birth and to open that portal, to go into those altered states, to bring back her baby, to have her partner involved in this, okay? To say, here's the light that we created. Now, I gestated it for 9 months. You receive that light now, Father. You receive that light. You are the one. And we are the ones, okay? And I see fathers kneel before their moms. I see moms usually birthing on one knee, out of the bed, not squatting. It's too iffy. On one knee, and they can rise up if they need to, and they can hunker down if they need to. And when she gives birth, she's like, come on, and you are there, and here comes this baby, this light coming forth. And dads don't need to know another thing. They just run on instinct. And most dads will just pick up that baby, catch that baby, and put the baby face down between them. All right. And then what I see is that moms don't pick up their babies right away. All right. There's something I call the return. It's a very important part of labor in birth. And we're so worried about the baby breathing that we disturb this. We grab the baby, right? The baby comes and all of a sudden the baby's whisked over here by the neonatal team, okay, to make sure the baby's okay. If you're having a hospital birth, if you're having a home birth, the father instinctively knows, just put the baby down, okay, until she's ready. And meanwhile, the dad becomes this archangel. I mean, I see it. The wings come out. We're in a portal, okay? The wings come out of the dad, and the dad is crying because he's never been this high before. And there's their baby, and he's watching. And what is he watching now? When she comes back, all right, a couple of minutes, even 5 minutes, maybe, not even 3, 4, 5, whatever. When she comes back, all right, and she looks down and she sees her baby, all right, what's going to happen? This is what the dad is looking at. Is she going to pick up our baby? Is she ready? Is she a mother? And sure, and mom will scoop the baby up when she's safe. If a mother feels safe, she will allow the baby to just be there for a moment between them, come back, pick up the baby. All right. Now, do you know what we have found scientifically? If the lights are dim, when she picks up her baby like that and looks at her baby and the pupils are dilated, the retinas of both the mother and the baby begin to give off photons of light. In other words, they sparkle. And the dad, well, they haven't shown that yet, but I know when the dad is there and he's watching, all right, he's the archangel, and the ambiance is such that everything is just right and at peace. And he watches as she picks up their baby, and as if to say, I'm going to raise this baby. I'm going to be the lifeline of this baby. And you're in, right? We're doing this together, right? Right? You know, it's so amazing. And I am not in their field. I don't catch babies. It's not my privilege. I'm over there. All right. She knows where I am. She knows I'm not sneaking up on her or something like that, or on the phone somewhere, or reading a book or taking a snooze. I am there witnessing. And that's all she needs me for, is just a witness. And all women really need in birth is reassurance. They don't need a lot of things. I mean, I understand they're all well-meaning, and I understand also that women have been imprinted to believe that they need all of these things, not just the tests from the medical model, but a lot of this holistic model stuff, okay, that is not really giving a woman the message that you don't need to do this. You can do this on your own. You don't need to take hypnotherapy or homeopathy or anything else. If you want to, it's there. Do it. But remember, you don't need it. It's an imprint. We live in a culture where we are constantly feeling the need and the privilege to change people and to tell them what they need. This is not evolutionary. So I think women want you in the pregnancy, and they want you as a midwife in the postpartum, but for the birth, they don't need very much. Just reassurance in themselves, like you had with Jade, and reassurance in the fact that the people you have chosen to be with you have reassurance in you. All right.
I didn't think that this conversation would be therapeutic for myself, but now I'm starting to see that there's some elements that I kind of missed out on too, because you mentioned the lighting. I remember when the baby was finally brought to Jade's chest, she was just covering his eyes from the light. She didn't instinctively. You mentioned intuitively, and I'm very glad that you brought that up, because one of the reasons why I'm doing these episodes, not only this one, but all the other ones too, is because I truly believe that there is this intuitive knowing, not just in women, but in men too, all of us, that something is seriously wrong with how we're living. And with the portal, with being in the hospital, with everything from the moment the baby is brought into this world, now the baby experiences this too. It's like, how can we know anything different when this is what we've been imprinted with?
Yes.
So it's like the portal has been stopped, especially if like a C-section, it's not coming out of the portal anymore. So I feel like this stalls the woman's growth as well. So now they're kind of stuck, not necessarily in like this childlike state, but a previous guest has mentioned before in regards to men, we don't have this rite of passage for men. So what we have is we have adult boys. And now that I'm thinking about this and talking with you, it seems like the rite of passage for women has been completely stripped away. And it could be the conspiracy theorist in me, but it's like, it seems like it's meant to be this way. It's meant to hold us back from our true potential, what we could be as a family, what we could be as humans. So you mentioned also, what can guys do then? So in your courses, you mentioned being over supportive. The women don't want the men in the room. This is their process. When Jade was in labor at the house, I was trying to soothe her. I felt like I was, as you mentioned, just like working together as one single unit. We became one, but I guess in hindsight, speaking with you, maybe I was overstepping and trying to do too much, but I felt like I was giving her the nice little massages. I wasn't talking. I wasn't trying to give her any pep talks or anything like that. I was just there. I was quiet. What can men be doing then? What can the father be doing while their woman is in labor?
Well, that's a good question. And I feel like what, if anything needs to be managed, it's not the mother or the portal or the father. It's the scene. Okay. I mean, who's coming in and out? Who's making disturbances? Anticipating if she might have any needs, anticipating that she doesn't have any needs, and not assuming that she does. Okay. Just being yourself. Here's my manifesto for men. Ready? Okay. Number one, be yourself. All right. No one gets to tell you what to do. No one gets to tell you what to do. Number two, know that you have instincts. You have maybe the best instincts in the room, because who knows this woman better? All right. Certainly not me. Certainly not the midwife. Okay. Even her father, who's probably not in the room, but this is what I'm saying. You have instinctual responses. Number three, act on them. Know that you are absolutely free to act on your instinctual responses. No one has the right to tell you to be quiet or to remove you or to push you away. You, all right, know that you have these instinctual responses. And number three, act on them. Number four, know that you hold the charge for this birth, no matter where you are, in a home, hospital, anywhere. You, as a man, hold the charge for the birth in our culture, socially, legally, lawfully, religiously, familially, spiritually. Look at it, all the angles that you want to look at. It's the father who is responsible for these two people. It is the father who legally and lawfully holds the charge for the birth. So if you said to a caregiver, she doesn't like that right now, let's not do that, and they still do it, they're breaking the law. And if they think you're savvy, they won't break the law, all right? And they'll stop, all right? I think I heard her say no. That is so powerful. Why? Because you have just taken command of your birth and your family, like the law expects you to do. This is a legal construct. Men need to know that legally they hold the charge for the birth. Almost everybody I've talked to thinks the doctor holds the charge for the birth. Well, that doctor is never going to take your baby home. You are. And the law expects that. Many people think, well, the hospital's in charge of the birth. Oh, yeah? Is there some room down there in the hospital where they keep all the babies? No, the baby's going home with you. The hospital, the nurse, the doctor, they do not hold the charge. Now, if every man knew that, things would be so different. If every man knew that they hold the charge of, and there is a conspiracy to not let men know that. Mm-hmm. All right, and not let men know, to buddy up with the doctor and be friends with the dad, okay? So that if they want something, you'll help them convince her to do it. You see? Mm-hmm. In a hospital and they want to break her membranes and they buddy up to you. Oh, she really needs this, and I'm the doc and we're good friends. Honey, go ahead and get your membranes ruptured. The doc here is going to help you out. No, you see? And so we think that, the doctor's in charge. No, the doctor is not in charge. The doctor does not hold the charge. Men do. Men do not have any iota of how powerful they are in a birth when it comes to the family. When it comes to the family, you rule. Now, some people don't like that. Women want to say that they hold the charge for the birth. And ultimately they do. But in our culture today, a woman can say something and no one pay any attention to her. A man, no. They will pay attention to you, especially if you say it with the authority and the confidence that you hold the charge here. Mm-hmm. And when I say that men hold the charge, I do not mean that you have read all these books so you know what's going on so you can tell everybody what to do. I don't mean that. I mean you hold the charge. And let me tell you a story. So my friend Munira was in a hospital bed having her third baby, and her husband was with her at every moment. He's a strong, silent type. And so pretty much he stood, just kind of there, being totally present. And at one point, one of the nurses came in and said, well, we'd like to go ahead and put on the Pitocin. And, your doctor is going to come down in about an hour or two. And Munira said, well, I've already explained that we're not going to be, we're having a physiologic birth. We're not going to be using Pitocin. And the nurse was like, well, okay, I know that you don't, but, and kind of going through, like the spiel. All right. Well, her husband doesn't have to know a thing, wouldn't have to know what Pitocin was. He did, but he wouldn't have to. He just knew that somebody's bullying his partner. And so he just kind of walked over and kind of looked at the nurse, and she left. And then there's a strategy, and I don't want to denigrate nurses at all. I know that they are amazing people and they're taught to do this. They would never think to do this on their own because they respect people, but they are taught and forced to do these things. So the strategy is that then 3 nurses come in, and they did, one on each side, one at the foot of the bed, and they just were trying to convince her to do what they wanted her to do. So he walked over at this point and he looked at the 3 of them and he said, I think I heard her say no. Well, they left. That's how powerful the father is. Okay. And we have no inkling of that. And the medical model does not want to get into that with anybody, because that will open a great big can of worms. Okay. Well, who's really in charge here? Well, we're going to catch our baby. And I remember hearing a story where the doctor said, no, you can't catch the baby. And he said, yes, I can. And the nurse stuck up for the dad and said, well, sure he can. She got fired. Okay. But, all right. You see what I'm saying? So my manifesto for men, there's more. Let me go back. 1, be yourself. 2, know that you have instinctual responses. 3, act on them. 4, know that you hold the charge. 5, act on it. Act on it. You have the power to act on it. Number 6, be her perfect, intimate advocate. Do not leave her side. All right. Perfect. That doesn't mean you do things perfectly. It means who better to be her advocate than you? The perfect, intimate advocate. Anybody who put it out there that nobody can speak up to the doctor because the doctor's word, okay? No. All right. You are her advocate. And when you are like I heard her say no.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? That could save a marriage. Do you know what I mean? You didn't leave me there to the mercy of these bullying nurses. You stuck up for me. Wow, that's hot. You know what I mean?
Let's have another one.
Whoa,
Let's have another
remember
one.
that for the rest of her life. Or she'll remember you didn't stick up for me. You know I didn't want that vaginal exam. You know I didn't want to be exposed. You knew that I didn't want someone coaching me, pushing, and you let it happen. Versus, she doesn't want that. Let's not do that anymore. It's so simple. It doesn't have. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I like that male manifesto there, because men, you can play a very active role throughout the pregnancy as well. And I think that you should. I think that you should do your research, be involved, watch whatever it is together, go to the appointments together, and communicate, know what it is that she wants, what she wants us to look like, and come up with some type of plan together. And then, as you mentioned before, that everything is ordained, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we did end up in the hospital. I think it was probably for this very reason, because if it wasn't so, then we wouldn't be on this call together. And that's kind of just the way that I look at life, is everything happens for a reason, and there's a lesson to be learned from whatever it was. And if we went through some type of struggle, that's so that we can hold the light at the end of the tunnel to guide people in the direction that we think that you should go anyway. But
well, the direction that feels most evolutionary.
yeah. And I mentioned earlier how the OBGYN, she kept mentioning C-section, and I was fuming. Internally I was fuming, but I was like a duck. I was calm on the surface, but paddling 100 miles an hour underneath the water. And I had to get into some type of arguments, I would say, trying to stall the clamping of the cord, because I've read that it's beneficial for baby to get all the blood from the placenta. Don't clamp it right away. So I was a little argumentative with the OBGYN, trying to, I guess, not one up her, but there's an ego aspect to this. Like, she has the perceived credentials, and who am I? So how can we communicate then while standing up for our partner in a collaborative way and not so argumentative? So that way everyone gets their needs met.
Okay, well, I do want to talk about that. But I also want to be really clear. I think moms and dads should be very together at birth. I don't think that was me who said that they shouldn't, in the sense of working together and catching babies and
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, what is collaboration? Collaboration is that two parties get their needs met. Nobody gets everything they want, but you could get your needs met. All right. So the hospital does not really try to collaborate with you necessarily, and that's a shame, because we're coming to their home, their house. All right. And you'd think that they would hold their hand out first to collaborate, but it doesn't happen. So we'll collaborate first. So we'll give you what you need. What does the nurse need? The nurse is the one that's going to come in and ask you to do this and ask you to do that. And she can, tell you that there are always, drugs ready anytime. And, and sometimes sometimes it's annoying, but this is what she's supposed to do. So what does she need? What can we give her? Well, I'm going to cut to the chase. First of all, everyone needs respect and gratitude. Thank you for helping us with our birth. Thank you. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. All right. I appreciate you that you're taking good care of my partner. That's that kind of thing. So appreciation and gratitude. 2, she needs to do her job. Do you know what I'm saying? She does. And part of her job is carrying out the doctor's orders. It's not her idea to put you on Pitocin at all. She could, you're not going to lose sleep if you don't take any Pitocin. But the doctor has said, I'll be there in 2 hours. Make sure that she's ready to have a baby. Okay. And so she has to kind of, she has to figure out ways to talk you into getting Pitocin because that's her job. All right. And 3, she needs to know that you are informed. All right. That you were told why we want to do this. All right. Why do we want the Pitocin? Well, your labor's taking a long time and we feel like, maybe a little Pitocin would just get things going and you don't want that. So you're saying, well, we have plenty of other things that we can do. Thank you. All right. But here's the thing. If you go into a hospital and it's no, 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 I mean, the nurse is like, why are they even here? Mm-hmm. It's okay, let's collaborate, meaning I know what you need, so I'm going to give you what you need. So you, the dad, because you're the powerful one, all right, you hold the charge. You are going to say to her, we understand that you need to do your job and that the doc's going to want you to have us ready to have a baby, but we're not accepting that. But you know what? When the doc comes, I'm going to tell him that you're a great nurse and that you have done everything that you could possibly do for us. And I'll make sure he knows that we refused to have the Pitocin and it's not on you. Whoa. And furthermore, we're going to explain to him that we knew why we're not sitting here in the dark. You explained very well why you wanted her to have Pitocin, but that's not in our plan. And you have to do that because at that point, the nurse is like, okay, they've got my back. Yeah. So if you can have their back, they'll have yours. All right.
Otherwise, just like egos clashing. And this isn't something that I had known prior. This wasn't in the plans at all. So was really unexpected. And like you said, they're not going to put out their hand first to offer to collaborate because one of the first things that we heard when we got in there was, you're under our care now. So it was almost like a intimidation factor. It's like, we'll see about that.
Yeah, exactly. Everything that you wanted is off the table, And so what does the doctor want? Well, we have to give the doctor what he needs or she needs, right? And first of all, they need probably a lot more respect and a little bit of, polish. All right. You've got to, first of all, kind of respect them and be, because they are the highest authority there when it comes to knowledge about birth in the clinical way. Mm-hmm. So you got to stroke the ego of a doc. And you've also got to make sure that, okay, so thank you, doc. You're terrific. We've got great nurses here. And then what the doctor really needs from you, all right, is this. He needs to know that you are satisfied with your care and that you are not going to write a review tomorrow, okay, that says, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the doc needs to know that you're happy with what's happening, because if not, the doc will suffer. All right. Now that we have reviews that you can read and the internet and all of that. So things like saying, we're really satisfied with with the care that we're getting here. And here's another thing that we want to have, as if, yeah, you've been with us all the way, all right, and we've been collaborating all the way. So let's just keep it up, doc. So here's another thing that we'd like to have, or something like that. But respect, gratitude goes a long way and should be the first thing that we offer. Next, all right, we should act like we are in charge. And if you're in charge, you're going to say, okay, I'm in charge. It's my job to make sure everybody gets what they need in this room. It's not really, okay, but that's how you're going to handle it. So we got the nurses back. And now you've got the doctor where you have got the doctor in a way where he or she realizes that they are appreciated, that they're happy with their care. All right. And it depends on the caregiver that you have. And this goes for home birth midwives as well. All right. They need to have gratitude. They need to do their jobs. Okay. They don't need to please you. That's not a real high up on the otherwise, you would see different things going on if everyone had your back, but you're expected to have their back. You see what I'm saying? So you got to straighten that out right away. All right. And it's up to, I think, the dad to tell the caregiver how they would like their care unfolded, or otherwise you'll get managed birth. When you go to a hospital, you have a choice. Now, I mean, I'm talking about hospital births. We usually don't go to hospitals, right? But if you do, you have a choice between managed birth, which is the default, or physiologic birth, which means nobody manages me and I'm just here under your care. All right. But I'm refusing vaginals unless I want one. I don't want coach pushing, no cutting of the cord. I need to have my own return. I need to do my labor my way. I don't want medicines and I don't want you to offer them to me. We know that you have them, and thank you. And thank you for respecting us. The nurse loves to hear that. Thank you. You're amazing. We really love being so respected. That goes a long way. But then I have to tell you, too, that sometimes nurses have to do their job, and sometimes their job is not what they would really want to do. But they have to do their job. And so do midwives. Midwives have to answer to whoever is their authority. All right. You see what I mean? So this is but as a father, you have the absolute right as a man to unfold your birth, you and your partner, the way you want. And she is vulnerable. So you need to speak for her. You can just look at her face and tell if she's happy, if she wants something else, if she doesn't want something, if she wants, whatever. If she wants the people in the room to go, but she doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, you're going to have to do that. You know what? I think we need to just kind of rest for a while here. And so if you're not, directly involved in the birth, would you go on down to the cafeteria or wait outside the door, things like that? It's good for the dads to have these little scripts or something, or just to let dads know that you have every right to say that and people will listen to you. Why? Because you hold the charge. You hold the charge for your birth. You are her perfect intimate advocate. You get to speak up for her. Doulas don't do that. Doulas don't speak up for people. They have decided that that's not what they do. They will help you speak up for yourself. But I think that's ridiculous. A woman is in labor. She shouldn't have to say a word to anyone else. She's opening a portal. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're disturbing that. So yeah, I think that if you understand what you have going for you as the father of the baby, you can get a lot of what you want. And this goes for at home as well. All right. Telling your caregiver that you don't want coach pushing. You don't want the membranes ruptured. I'll tell you another story. So one time I worked with this couple, and then 2 years later they got pregnant, and the mom called me and she said, Whapio, I have to tell you this story. She said, I had two midwives and they were lovely midwives, and my labor was taking a while, and they suggested rupturing the membranes. And when they said, maybe that will speed things up or something like that. And all of a sudden, as soon as they said that, my husband said no. And I looked at him and he said no. And he said, you didn't even let them finish. He said no. And the midwives were like, well, it's not going to hurt. It's this or that or the other thing. And he said, no, that's not what we're going to do. So they didn't do it. And then she said, Whapio, later on, baby was born and the placenta came out. And what we all realized was that if the midwives had ruptured your membranes, When they went in, the cord was not completely on the placenta, and there was just this network of veins and arteries exposed. And if they had ruptured the membranes and pulled that up, I would have had a massive hemorrhage.
Mm.
And she said, we were like, to the father, like, how did you know that? And he was like, I just knew.
Mm.
And he was himself, and he knew he had instinctual responses, and he acted on them, and he knew he held the charge, and he was a perfect intimate advocate, and he showed up as his highest and best. All right. That's my manifesto for men.
Hmm. So I'm really glad we got into that, because this is stuff that I didn't even know about. Like, and I did a ton of research too, but I can't know, right? I couldn't at the time know everything, just because everything was so fresh and so new. And anyone that's listening to this, you're mentioning not not coaching the pushing or rupturing the membranes. Meanwhile, this is kind of what happened during Jade's pregnancy. She was being coached to push. So why would you say not to do that?
Because you're an external force trying to assume that you know how that baby should come out. Whereas babies have maneuvers that they make. They're called the cardinal movements of labor. Okay. And if you're telling her to push and the baby is not at that stage, you're just jamming the baby there. You could jam the shoulder up on the pubic bone if you take her if she's pushing without the urge to push. What we are thinking, and this is physiologic birth, is that your physiology will tell you when to push. And if you leave it alone and let everything get in alignment with the baby, your body, and you, all right, you, your baby's body, your body, if you just let it be, that it'll get in alignment and your baby will come out very smoothly without any tears and without 3 hours of pushing and breaking capillaries in your eyes. Mm. Okay, now if there's an emergency, I get it. Or if but I feel like if I could change one thing, it would be condemning coached pushing. Why? Because how do you know what that baby needs right now? And, just because you're not pushing, the uterus is still pushing. The uterus is still pushing. There are two groups of people that have the easiest births in town. One of them are heart patients. Heart patients with the type 3 and 4 heart disease, they're not allowed to push. And you'd think, oh yeah, they have all have cesareans and forceps. Nope, their babies just ooze out. And the other group is paraplegic women or quadriplegic women who their legs are paralyzed, but their uterus isn't, and their uterus will just birth that baby. Mm-hmm. All right. And this is documented. All right. And this is documented in writing that these two groups of people have the easiest births in town. So it might show you that the best course of action is just not to push. Let the body birth the baby. And then when the head is there, you push. All right. Mm. But pushing a baby from way up there, very dangerous. Shoulder dystocias happen. Babies go into fetal distress because there's too much pushing. They get reoxygenated. And also because physiologically, we don't understand pushing. Every contraction was not meant to get full-on power. Those contractions of pushing are like ocean waves. You know how you've been out in the rollers and there's a wave and there's a wave and then there's a wave and then there's another one. That's how pushing is. There'll be a little, and then, oh, here's the big one, the big contraction, and that gives you some progress. And then a little one, oh, here comes another one. This is how you save a woman's reproductive tract. All right? You don't torpedo a baby out when the baby's not there. You watch the baby, okay? The contractions will come in sets, not every push. This is why we have fetal distress. All right? We're not in tune with the body.
And this is all we see throughout like Hollywood, any films, any shows. Everyone just assumes push, push, and you see the women screaming, their heads off. Meanwhile, when I was watching some of the birthing videos, like the at-home births, the baby would literally just slide out. I'm like, what? It's here?
Yeah,
It's
see?
possible. It's possible.
It is. Okay. And I mean, every birth is different and unique. And I can't speak for all births that they're all going to be so straightforward. If you just listen to what I say, I think everyone should have the option to birth the way they want. And if you want coached pushing, well, who should tell you you shouldn't? Not me. I mean, I'm just saying what I've seen. When you don't coach push, babies often come out much more easily and with much less damage. All right. And it kind of makes sense that you don't push something that's not there. All right. But what I'm interested in is that women get to make their own choices, sovereignty for women.
Mhm.
I really feel like that's the first step in reclaiming birth. And then I'll tell you the second step. The second step is this. Okay, a woman has a right to say, don't put that in my birth. I don't want that. No, I can refuse. I want women to take it to the next step. And the next step is I have every right to decide who will be with me when I give birth. That means that there's no criminalization at all for midwives or anyone. No one, parents are taking the responsibility. I choose who I want at my birth, and that is my primary caregiver. And maybe it's my sister, maybe it's an ambulance tech who's my brother, maybe it's a midwife, maybe it's a woman who sits with women at birth, maybe it's the lady next door. It doesn't matter. There's no criminality to whom I choose to give birth with. And that would really relax midwives, okay? Because the woman has a choice to have you with her. You don't need to have a license. You don't need to. It's her choice. She can pick an unlicensed practitioner or a licensed practitioner or someone who, the plumber, okay, without having any criminal charges or any kind of criminality associated with who a woman chooses to have at her birth. And then all of this, say again?
That's their right.
Yes, it is. How dare we take that away from a woman? And this is what I'm saying. Women have to now do this for us. Make it so that no midwife is ever charged with anything criminal unless she did something negligent or fraudulent. And that goes for the world.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned choice there, and going through your course with Jade, what is the illusion of choice that women are presented with within the holistic model of midwifery, where the midwives are restricted with their license? So it seems like you're doing something that is within your choice, but it's actually kind of just the same thing packaged differently.
Well, one of the good things about women, all right, is that they spearhead a lot of the changes. Usually it's not the caregiver that spearheads the change. Okay. So we came to a point in our history where women insisted on being treated more humanely in hospitals. When I was being born in 1947, my mother was in a room with 10 other women, and some of them were screaming, some of them were crying, some of them were frozen to death. Like, I'm like, what's going on out there? They had those green curtains around and the dads were not let into the hospital. What has changed? Well, a lot. Women birth in their own rooms and the dad can catch the baby. Okay. Yes, there is a lot of change. All right. For the better. All right. But what happened was that women said, we want choice and we want respect. And then Hensi Gore, a really good researcher, looked at what was going on in the 80s and the 90s when women were asking for choice and said, well, you're not being given real choice. You're being given choice like, do you want this green room or the blue room? You're asked, would you like your vaginal now or would you like to wait? Well, real choice is, do you want a vaginal or not? Okay. And not in an incriminating way. But what happens is that women have those choices, but they're not using them. All right. A lot of times women in labor don't want to have to fight, you
Mhm.
know? So oftentimes those choices that you could have made or that you made beforehand are no longer on the table now that you're in the hospital. All right. Because in the hospital, it's always a touch and go, wait and see. We do what's needed rather than your plan trumps everything. Okay. So it's not really choice. It's the illusion of choice. But what you get to choose is not the real thing. All right. Not the big thing. I don't get to choose whether I want the vaginal or not. I get to choose if I want it now or later. That's the illusion of choice. All right. And I do know that this terrible thing has happened where if if you offer informed consent and informed choice, in some cases you can lose your job. There have been midwives who have said, "Oh, you don't want the glucose tolerance test?" Yes, no, I don't. I want informed choice and informed consent. Okay, then we won't do it. Well, if a midwife does that a few times, what's going to happen to her is that someone's going to come and say, listen, in our practice, we give the glucose tolerance test. Well, she didn't want it. Well, that's too bad. If you're in our practice, you get that test. And so if you keep on doing that, we'll have to let you go. See what I'm saying? If you keep on offering a woman choice, this is not our policy. Well, so what are we saying? That really informed choice is not in your policy? Pretty much. Okay. And it's being eroded. All right. I mean, your sister, I tell women, your sisters fought very hard for us to have informed choice. There was no such thing in the 50s, 60s, or early 70s. You did what your doctor said. All right. And now, look, you can do anything you want, really. So use informed consent. Use that choice. That's what the dad is there for, because you shouldn't have to fight for something. You're having a baby,
Mhm.
and here's your protector. Here's your archangel. Here, watch out, everybody. Here comes the father of the baby. Okay, now we'll find out what's going on. I mean, my friend Emily, she is a doula and a midwife, and she said she was midwifing this couple one time, and she says, I always tell the dad, you hold the charge for this birth. And the dad was like, what? I don't think so. And she said, let me explain. Well, look at the law. You take this family home. Look at the legal system. You will pay for this child until they're 18. Look at the religious system. Look at the cultural system. Look at the society. He's like, yeah, I guess I do. And so the mom had a seizure in her pregnancy, and nobody knew why. Her doctor didn't understand it. She was okay. The baby was fine. Never had another one. All right. But she had it. So when it came time to give birth, they wanted a spontaneous vaginal birth. You know what I mean? They wanted their own birth. And the doctor was like, okay, let's just see how it goes, Well, they were happy. Mom was in bed. She was in labor. It was moving on. And all of a sudden, the mom had a seizure. All right. Now, my friend Emily told me that this was a very tiny, tiny room. She said, I think it was a closet at one point, because you had the bed and you had barely enough room for people to come up along the side. Okay. So it was a really small room. Well, she had a seizure, and bells and whistles went off, and people came running down to the room, and the room filled up with people. Emily and the dad were like pushed against the wall, and people didn't know what to do. And Emily said it was kind of like a circus, because one person was saying, sit her up. Another person was saying, lay her down. Another person was said, put a rag in her mouth. Another person said, give her a drink of water. It was like they looked at each other like, what's going on here? And here's the doctor running in with her skirts flying and her clipboard. And finally, the dad looked at Emily, and he just kind of shook his head. And he said, there are too many people in this room. I need you to leave. Well, everyone left. And then as the doctor was going out, he said, Doc, will you stay with us? He said, oh, of course. he said, now what happened? He said, well, it was a she. She said, your wife had a seizure and we don't know why. And, he said, well, what do you think? I mean, you must think something. She said, well, I think you should have a C-section is what I think. And he said, okay. And so he said to his wife, well, what do you want to do? And she said, oh, I'll tell you right now, that was terrifying. I will have a C-section. The vaginal birth is out now. That was terrifying. She said, okay, you sure? She said, yes, I'm positive now. All right. And he said, well, okay, doc, I guess she wants a C-section. We're going to have a C-section. And the doc said, okay, I'm going to go get everything ready. We'll just go ahead and do it right now. Or, And the dad said, well, wait a minute. Before you go, come on up here. And so here's the mom in bed, and dad is on one side, doctor's on the other side. And he says to her, Doc, this isn't what we had planned. We really wanted to have a vaginal birth, but we're not going to have one. I want you to give my wife the best C-section you have ever done. Your highest and holiest C-section. And the doctor was like, ooh. She went down to the woman's feet and she held her feet and she said, don't worry about a thing. I've got you. And then it could be like that, It could be like that.
Make the best of a situation.
Yes. The highest and holiest C-section she'd ever done. All right. And I will tell you another thing. And I say this all the time, and it hasn't landed yet. Okay. But men could stop obstetrical violence in a week. If every man said, don't do that to my wife. She doesn't like that. That's violating. Don't do that to my wife. And don't do it to anybody else's either. Because men have the charge. And if a man says to a doctor, don't cut her, he will put the scissors down. Because first of all, that man was savvy enough to know that he had the charge. And if he's that savvy, he might sue you. Okay? So the scissors will go down. The doctor will stop. The coach pushing will end. People will leave the room at your command. Why? Because you hold the power. You hold the charge. You could make things better in this world. Men, I implore you, you could make things better. Don't do that to my wife, and don't do that to anyone else. Why can't that be our rallying point? All right? And obstetrical violence would stop because of men, and that will go down in the history books.
I mean, you're supposed to be the protector, and you're not filling your role. So I don't think that people understand just how much that you can actually deny in the medical system. We've had 2 incidences where Jade's had to go to the hospital within the previous year, and we just say no. We just say we said no to the vaccines that we didn't want, and I had to follow the baby around like a hawk to make sure that they didn't do so because I didn't trust them in the setting. But we just kept saying no. We kept saying no. We kept saying no. They wanted to hold us for 48 hours, and then we just kept asking over and over and over again, can we leave? Can we leave? Because that's not where we want to be when we're trying to bond as a family in the hospital. But it's incredible just how much is pushed onto you, no matter what circumstance, not even if you're giving birth, but it's almost like a protocol where the nurses, there's good nurses. I'm not trying to throw everyone under the bus, but they're just following protocol. There's all these codes with insurance. They're following orders from above. It's like, but these things aren't necessary. If you don't know that, though, people tend to just comply. And you mentioned this in your course as well. There's compliance through fear. There's compliance through shame. And there's even compliance through love. Like people want to please their caregivers, whether that's a midwife or it's an OBGYN. Right. But you don't need to comply whether you're a man or you're a woman. It's like, you have your rights. People cannot do something to you unless you've given the permission. At the end of the day, it's still voluntary. One way you may not like it, but you're the one that's giving them consent to whatever operation that it is.
Right. And so when you make your decision, you do it in gratitude and thankfulness for the doctor or the nurse or whomever is there. And you are sure to stick up for each other. You're going to stick up with the nurse, with the doctor, because she is doing her job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And a lot of times people are not going to stop doing their job for you. Okay. You know, and we need to let the doctor know that we're satisfied with his care and that he's a good guy or she's a good gal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, well, I think more and more people in 10 years will not be going to hospitals. All right. I think that more and more people are going to want their own birth. More and more people are going to want educated women who are the fountain of information, who will stand with you, but not make your decisions. All right. But help you facilitate. We're facilitators, making things more facile, more easy. That's who we are. We're helping you to get what you want, but we're not telling you what you want or need or pressuring you for anything. That's what's going to be coming. And the other thing is this. You know, birth is a very transformational and sacred event. And there are things that happen in birth, like the sprinkles on the retina, okay? And the portaling, where a mother then goes into a completely different dimension. And let me say this, by the way, when a woman opens that portal and goes through, a lot of the pain does not come. The pain recedes. The pain is ordinary reality. And she's going into a different state of consciousness and reality where the pain is in the background, if it's even there anymore. Okay. So we worry so much about pain relief, and it's built in. Go to altered states. There's no pain there, or very little. Okay. We take that away from women. We take a lot of the innate tools that they have for dealing with pain or dealing with variations of labor. All right. We don't give them the chance. The first hint of anything, we rush in and we say, oh, the baby needs to get out now. Push, push, push. Well, that's worse than letting the baby stabilize inside and come out gracefully instead of push, push, push. I mean, and then talk about sacred, talk about that moment where a dad sees his wife pick up that baby, all right, pick up their child, and then he gets to say, I'm in, you know, I'm in. And I'm over here in the corner as the witness. I tell you this, I have hardly ever walked into another person's birth and said, oh, okay, do you need me? All right, no, we don't. We need you. That's the presence of reassurance. That's what we need. We need you to be over there. We've got this, rather than, okay, we're going to do this and I'm going to help you. Mm-hmm. No, that's not a rite of passage. And this is what women are telling me. I had a great birth, but something's missing. That's what was missing. You didn't do it. There's a time in labor when a woman, the scenario, it's transition. When it gets really like, oh, I'm almost completely open. You know, this is the first time I've ever been this open, maybe, and whatnot. And at this time, all right, this is a holy mountain experience. Okay, this is the time where a woman learns how to make an act of will. An act of will is not a suggestion or an affirmation or anything like that. It's an act of will. In other words, I will go up that hill. I will claim the soul of my baby. I will skip on down. I know how to make an act of will now, because nothing else is more important. And when I say it's going to happen, it will. And that's the kind of mother I am going to be. You will not go in the road. All right. You will not. She learns to make an act of will. For some women, it's the first time they've ever had to do that. For some people, they make acts of will every day to live. I know that. But an act of will. And we take this away from her. Why? Because we don't want her to have any pain. We don't want her to be. Do you see what I'm saying here? Yeah.
Pain's not always bad. Like there's something to be learned from it. That's your rite of passage, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. It's part of it. And it's part of learning how to get out of pain by going into altered states. There's so much. Birth is so immense. There's such a magnitude to birth. All right. As I said before, if we could see that, then we would live in a different vibration. And the things that we do to people that are inappropriate would just disappear. We wouldn't be that in that realm anymore. We would not be on that vibrationary level.
I believe it. I agree with you. So last question that I have for you, with the emergence of free birth, because this is new to me, I'm hearing more and more like friends and people being open to free births, which I guess would be just no midwives, no doulas, no nothing, or maybe you could elaborate on that. But throughout pregnancy, what screenings and tests are actually necessary? If someone's going through with a free birth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know. When I was a midwife, I didn't require any tests. The thing I asked you to do was make sure that you are free from any kind of sexually transmitted infection. And you can always run down to the health department and get a screen. I think that's important, especially if you're not monogamous or if you're having a lot of sex or whatever. Okay. Make sure you're not carrying anything. You could get a complete blood count, but it's not necessary. You could get a strep test, but I think that causes more chaos than it's worth. I've never given anyone a strep test. Okay. I've never given anyone a glucose tolerance test. We do these tests because we don't intuitively know how to look at the patterns of a woman's health. We just don't. I don't think there's anything that's really absolutely necessary. Maybe knowing your blood type, but if you've transported, they would take your blood type anyway. All right. Screenings. No. I mean, I worked for 20 years without doing any kind of testing at all. And I have seen very, very few complications. I've only seen one woman in 20 years, or I have a hemorrhage. And people are telling me the statistics are 5 out of 10. I'm like, that's ridiculous. But I think when we trust women and we trust ourselves and we know what we're doing and we've done our due diligence, which to me is 1 year of devotion to learning about birth. I mean, birth is not rocket science. It's not meant to be an academic discipline. Okay, knowing what about birth. My goal is that you can walk into a woman's room at any given point in her labor and know exactly what's going on. Exactly what's going on. Give me a minute just to observe, and I can tell you she hasn't opened the portal yet, so she's probably at 4 centimeters. Or she's the portal's opening, all right, and everything is changing. Don't you feel it? Or she's getting near to pushing. All right. Really, you don't need all these vaginal exams and tests and screens and all of that. That's a carryover from the medical model. Really, that's an adaptation of the medical model, but doing it holistically. All right. That's the illusion of choice. It's the same stuff. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's the same. Whether you're going to a doctor or a midwife or a birthing center or someone who's been trained to manage you, at the end of the day, it's all the same. So with free birth, to me, free birth is that a couple just decides to do their birth the way they feel like doing it. Maybe it's just the both of them. Maybe they've invited a friend. Maybe they're sister's an ambulance tech or a nurse, or maybe they want a doula there as a witness. I mean, I don't know what the rules are, and there are no rules. It's just you having your birth free to choose whatever you want. All right. And free to choose having your friends in the yard. You know what I mean? Singing to you, or no one, or in the dead of night, getting up and having your baby and putting him in bed with you. And then when your husband wakes up, there's a baby. I don't know. It's whatever you want to do. And most people who free birth just say, oh, my husband and I, we just had the baby at home. It was beautiful. I have heard very few stories of babies who died. And, one time Oprah had this thing where she had 6 women on, and all of these women were just kind of normal women, and they were all planning hospital births, but none of them made it to the hospital. One of them had a baby in her living room because it was too late. One of them had the baby on the front porch as they were leaving. One of them had the baby in a taxi or something. It was these 6 women. None of them had, and none of them had any problem at all. They all showed up at the hospital with an intact baby and no bleeding or anything. And each one of those women said, that was my favorite birth. Mm-hmm. Each one of those dads said, that was my worst nightmare. But here's my point. Birth usually goes well.
Yeah.
All right. It usually does.
I feel like when you add all the interventions and all the beep boops and stuff, and you don't allow it to happen naturally, that's when things tend to go awry.
So. Yeah, things get out of alignment. All that adrenaline is not good. All right. And a woman being overlooked, a husband being overlooked. I think what happens, like I told you that story about Buddy, and how something happened to them because I wasn't there. That's what I want. That's what I want to elevate and exalt.
Stories like that just prove that the body can do what it needs to do. Like we have the innate ability to heal ourselves, but we don't need to go to what I see overall is that people have lost trust within themselves. So when I ask about the screening and the tests, like what's actually necessary, to me, it's common sense that we really don't need too much because we got here somehow. And we got here without all the technology that we currently have, the technology that kind of takes us away, and we rely on that. That's our crutch. We depend on that more than we actually trust our own bodies.
Yep.
And I've actually one more question. I lied. So with the holistic model, as we experienced, it's pretty much the same test. It's the same thing, just done differently. How could people find an independent midwife then?
Well, okay. I've moved us to a new paradigm. The holistic paradigm hasn't caught up with me yet, but I'm moving it to a quantum paradigm. And I am thinking about that quantum paradigm being a jump ahead. All right. And the quantum paradigm is all about nursing, and it's nurturing and self-direction and birth as an altered state and trust and transparency rather than testing or screening or whatnot. You are going, if you're what you seek seeks you. All right. I know that. And so there are women out there who do this, who are basically birth keepers. And for lack of a better word, because I don't call them midwives, but I do know that the birth keeper is the new midwife. Okay. She's the new wise woman. She's the village wise woman. All right. And more women are putting themselves out as doing this. When free birth came along, I mean, they had 5,000 followers all of a sudden, and then the next thing like within months, they had 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, 150,000. I mean, people want to take birth back into their own hands. And if you have something for that, if you have something for the evolution of birth, you will not be wasted, and people will find you. You will find each other. I promise, you can look for a birth keeper. I mean, I don't know if I like that word forever, but there's no other name that I can come up with, like except the wise woman of the village, But how do you find these women? Well, I'll tell you what. Evidently, they're here. Okay, in the cohort that I have now, there's like 70 people. In the cohort last year, there was 102. In the year before that, there were 67. I mean, women are wanting to be this person. I want to be this person for you and my community. So, put it out there that you're looking for a birth keeper, you know.
And then what you said, what you seek seeks you. That's exactly what happened to you. You wanted a home birth, and all of a sudden this guy walks in, shows you photos of his kid.
And the
Boom.
angels are singing. All right. And that is true. All right. That a lot of times what you seek seeks you. And especially if you focus on what you seek rather than what you don't have.
Mhm.
You seek something because you don't have something else. Just follow on with what you do want. And understand that there's always a flux. There's always a flux. It's like the yin and the yang. There's a little bit of yang in every yin and a little bit of yin in every yang. And we accept that as well.
Love it. Well, Whapio, I want to thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing all of your stories. I think that a conversation like this is extremely important, and this is going to be one of the things that honestly lead us back to human. You did mention how this isn't an academic course where like women should study birthing for a year. And I kind of find it funny because I almost feel like it should be in the curriculum. It's not. There's probably a very good reason why it's not. Just like nutrition isn't taught in school.
Oh, you mean there's no academics in the course?
No, I mean,
It's not being.
in the mainstream traditional, I call it indoctrination camps, like typical public schooling. That's what I mean. They don't offer a year-long course of, hey, here's how to have a kid,
Oh,
or
no.
here's how to take care of your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it should be offered in school.
Oh, I think so. And I think it should be just natural.
Mhm.
Well, of course you would want to know, how you got here.
Mhm.
No? Yeah, I agree with you. And I do think that we are easily imprinted, especially when we're scared. And COVID got us all scared. All right. But here's the thing. From that COVID, those scared people, a lot of people now refuse to be scared. And they went their own way and they didn't mask or they didn't vaccinate or they chose not to go to a hospital. They said, COVID has shown us that hospitals are not really safe places to be. And I feel the model that we're moving to is having doctors and midwives on retainer and birth keepers who take care of you really and help you find your things. And then if I have a retainer, like maybe twice I go see a midwife and something like that. And then if I need her, I can call her. Or if I need a doctor, I'll call, or I'll come to the ER and they'll have a special suite for people who, are coming in for birth care. All right. They somehow got over their head or whatever. They felt like they wanted to go in. But there's not a lot of transports really. Okay. From free birth or from the women I'm talking to. So I think it's going to change. I think that, and I think having a midwife on retainer is a great idea. Everybody wins. Everybody gets what they need. The midwife gets a client and the mom gets someone, that she can refer to if she needs to. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We will. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Whapio, so much for your time, and cut it there.
Your questions were amazing. I appreciate it. We got to talk about a lot of stuff.